Thank you, Ciarán, and I welcome the opportunity to contribute to these statements today on the programme for government. But in looking at it, I suppose you'd have to wonder why we're spending a whole week here and discussing this programme for government when you consider that there must be, and I would imagine that there is legislation, when you consider the amount of legislation that's guillotined in this House in the normal run of things, yet we set aside a week for the government to clap itself on the back in relation to the programme for government and their contribution to it. And we'll see some contortions and twists and turns as well, and saying how things have been met and targets have been achieved, when actually in a lot of cases they're not. And the theme of this one, I suppose, with the Minister for Jobs and Innovation at the start of this section is in relation to jobs, and that's what I would just like to start with. And and it has been said by other speakers, I mean, the government policy is totally, appears to be focused on foreign direct investment and achieving jobs growth, and this mantra that we hear of an export-led recovery and all that kind of stuff. And that's fine if you live within the Pale. It's fine if you live on the East Coast, but if you live in Donegal, it's a lot of empty rhetoric from this government, because there is no investment in foreign direct investment in Donegal. There is no priority for investment in rural areas, and there is no commitment from this government to develop rural areas or invest in rural areas to create jobs so that people can have some expectation that they might be able to find work if they live outside of Dublin, and have some expectation that they might be able to develop a career for themselves and enable themselves to stay in their own communities. So much so across Donegal that families are devastated with emigration. I spoke to a constituent over the weekend there who has 6 children. 2 of them are in Australia, 2 of them are in Canada, one's in England at university, and the 6th child is at home, and they're thankful for that, but they're only at home because they're still at school. And when they complete their schooling, they will go on for further education, and they will emigrate as well. And that story is repeated right across Donegal, in every community, in practically every household, where you're rearing your children for emigration. And that's the failing of this government's policy. We had up until September in this House, we had an ad hoc committee or cross-party committee meeting in relation to CEDRA, which was the Committee for Economic Development of Rural Areas, which Phil Hogan, the Minister for Environment Community, had initiated and funded, and 2 very earnest men were going around the country meeting, and a whole raft of public meetings about getting ideas and developing ideas, and we're very enthusiastic about it, about what could happen, what could be done for rural areas, and what could be done to stimulate economic development, and hearing the views of the public. There was supposed to be a report published in September. It's disappeared off the face of the earth. We can't find out what's happening in relation to CEDRA. Is there a report coming? Is there a report planned? Is there anything going to happen? I doubt very much if there is, because this government's priority is not in protecting rural areas and protecting areas outside of Dublin. And that is a sad reflection, and that's going to be the legacy of this government in terms of jobs and lack of job creation. If you take, for example, in Donegal at the moment, we have, in my own town of Killybegs, we have a campus of Letterkenny Institute of Technology, long established for 40, 50 years, of a catering college that was there, which was previously a cert school, and amalgamated with LYIT in 2007, which was supposed to copper fasten the future of it and allow it to develop into a full 3rd level institute over a period of years. But at the moment, LYIT want to close it down, and they want to take it back to Letterkenny if they're lucky. The HEA are saying that there's no funding to move it back to Letterkenny, so there's a very real risk that that would close down and be lost altogether. That's a facility with a huge international reputation for producing the best quality chefs and the best quality people to work in the hospitality sector. And you contrast this with just in the last week, where the launch of the Wild Atlantic Way took place, 2,500 kilometres of coastline that can be developed with huge economic potential. But yet here's a tourism college on the route of the Wild Atlantic Way, which is under threat. And it's under threat because of the funding model that has been developed by this government in terms of how they fund third-level institutions. This is a college that is growing in numbers and is developing and could be in a position to pay for itself and to finance itself in the future if it was given the breathing space. But this government isn't doing it, and it isn't happening. And there's many other instances like that. In Killybegs, where I live, 26.3% of the workforce are unemployed, when the national average is 19%. Right across Donegal, 24% of unemployment right across at every community. This is going to be the legacy of job creation in this government. We had the Western Development Commission publish a report about 4 years ago in relation to the creative industries and what the creative industries could do in the Northwest. They estimated that by 2018 the creative industries could create 18,000 jobs in the Northwest if it was simply given the ability to be able to develop its web presence, develop its internet marketing, and allowed to grow in that way. We have seen no movement on it in relation to that. These are things that could develop in rural areas and could provide jobs outside of the foreign direct investment and provide real jobs that would keep young people in our communities and keep our communities growing. And we look now in relation to the health services, and the one positive thing I think that has come out in the last couple of days is that universal health insurance is in serious bother, and I hope that we see the death of universal health insurance over the next year or so, but that would be one thing that I'd be glad to see in relation to the programme for government, because it is not about providing universal health care for our citizens. What it is about handing over control of the health services to private companies. It's been almost a disaster, I would say, in Holland, where competition has shrunk since the introduction of universal health insurance, where costs of premiums have skyrocketed, where people can't get and access treatment in a timely fashion. And I would welcome the fact that if this government abandons it completely over the next year, because I think that's something that will have to happen. And we look in the health service as well in relation to care of older people and community care. The programme for government states that you will invest in the supply of more and better care for older people in the community, and in residential settings will be a priority for this government. But yet we see right across Donegal community hospitals with beds closed because of an embargo being maintained by this government, where in my own town of Killybegs we have a 41-bed community hospital where currently there's 8 beds closed because there's no staff to open those beds, where we have other community hospitals are overrun with patients, where patients are still in Letterkenny General Hospital and other hospitals and can't get beds to step down into the community because the embargo keeps those beds closed. So we talk about job creation, we talk about giving care for older people and providing for them in the programme for government, and we don't see it happening. None of that is happening. We have the mental health services where the so-called commitment to ring-fence 35 million euros every year to develop the mental health services. We know that that money hasn't been spent. We still can't find out exactly where it's going. It's going back into the black hole in the health services. It's not been spent on mental health services.
2 minutes.
For sure, and that's a failure within the programme for government. And as well as that, we see then in relation to the asylum seeker process, and I think that this is a major scandal that will break in years to come, where we see the commitment is that we will introduce comprehensive reforms of the immigration, residency and asylum systems, which will include a statutory appeals system and set out rights and obligations in a transparent way. But yet we have people in this country who've been in the direct provision system for 10 years. 10 years, and then that is criminal, and that is an absolute disgrace. And we have children who are being born into direct provision. We have parents of children who are refusing to take them back out of care because they're taking them back into a direct provision system. And I wonder, in 5 or 10 or 15 years' time, will we have a government minister standing up and apologising on behalf of the state because of the way that these children who will be Irish children by that stage have been treated by the state in a system that is completely dysfunctional and a system that is in effect a system of open prisons. And the government committed to deal with this and still hasn't done it. And the people in direct provision should not be sitting there for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and up to 10 years and more. It is an absolute disgrace, and it's an abuse of their human rights. And the government should be making sure that this system is reformed and this system is changed. the programme for government. I could go on for the next an hour, no bother at all in relation to it. Those are just some of the highlights that I've picked out that I wanted to address in the time that I have. Again, I'll just finish up by saying that I think it's a disgrace that we're spending 4 days or 3 full days here today, this week, debating it, when I'm sure that there's legislation that could be put through and funding that could be found to deal with some of those priorities that we're talking about, rather than debating the programme for government.